Hi. Oh my God, I'm so nervous. I would do anything to be out there judging all the speakers instead of sitting here. I'm so nervous, it's imperative I start with a bad joke. I heard it in the back in the green room. So 2 fishes are swimming. One of them hits a wall. The other says, "Oh, damn." You get it? Damn. So a few summers ago, I met a bright, young, funny, silly, hardworking, young Latina high schooler named Angie. Angie lived in a poor city in an otherwise wealthy northeastern state. She wanted to be the first in her family to go to college. Now, when I met Angie, I was completing my doctoral studies at the University of Connecticut, training to become a scholar of poverty. All the literature I was reading by scholars of poverty on kids like Angie and the communities they grow up in overwhelmingly focused on drugs, gangs, violence, and teen parenthood. Now, scholars disagreed about why it is that communities like the one where Angie was growing up were plagued by drugs, gangs, violence, and teen parenthood, or what we call risk behaviors. Some of them argued that it was because the cultures of those communities were inferior. Others more slyly argued that the cultures of those communities were inferior. And still others said that drugs, gangs, violence were reactions to structural constraints. Either way, they agreed that to challenge the cycle of poverty, we must target drugs, gangs, violence, and teen parenthood. So when I met Angie and befriended her, along with 15 other Black and Latinx people growing up in this poor community, I thought to myself, wow, I must have come across a rare group of kids. I told my advisor, these are kids who are not involved in drugs, have nothing to do with gangs, do not engage in violence, they denounce teen pregnancy, they avoid drugs at all cost. I thought it may be worth documenting how it is that some kids growing up under the constraints of poverty manage to overcome their struggles and become socially mobile. How it is that some people are able to climb up while others get stuck. An interesting question, right? At this time, I was also training to become an ethnographer. What that means is that I spend long amounts of time in particular communities to then write about how it is that larger social structures and forces impact the everyday lives of its members, and vice versa. So I set out to follow Angie and 15 other Black and Latinx folks over 3 years. I followed them every day, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., right? Following them through every context of their lives, in the hopes of writing how it is some of America's most oppressed obtain the American dream. While I was following Angie and the 15 kids, I met hundreds of other high schoolers in this northeastern city. And contradictory to what textbooks would have you believe, these kids had nothing to do with drugs, gangs, violence, or teen parenthood. They did not resemble the stereotypes of Black and brown urban America you see in the news, see in movies, even read in academic books. They were working hard, they had nothing to do with drugs, violence, gangs, teen parenthood. So I thought to myself, their futures ought to yield something better. Sandra, another young Black woman, even got an interview at Harvard. She, like Angie, was going to be the first in her family to go to college. I was excited. I met these kids in 2010. It is now 2018. Not a single one of them have achieved what they set out to. Sandra went nowhere. She now goes in and out of a regional campus of a 4-year university while working multiple jobs. Angie went nowhere. She's balancing community college classes with 2 or 3 jobs. So what happened? vast majority of Black and Latinx kids growing up in poor urban communities have nothing to do with drugs, gangs, or violence. Policies and practices that attempt to provide individualized solutions by altering behaviors fail. They fail because it's ineffective to challenge a problem that's systemic. So what I found during my 3 years of research contradicts popular imaginations about urban poverty. While we think of drugs, gangs, violence, and teen parenthood as feeding the cycle of poverty, in reality, it is our unfunded schools, mass eviction, mass incarceration, racist criminal justice system, low wages, unemployment that hold kids back. Another young Latina, Cassie, performed fairly well in school. She wanted to be a psychologist, also wanted to be the first in her family to go to college. The last year of high school was fairly rough for Cassie. Her parents are going through some financial struggles, so they had to rent out the second of their two-bedroom apartment to another family. To make things worse, Cassie got dumped by her boyfriend. We all know how hard that is. Oh, as if you've never been dumped. So Cassie ended up enrolling in community college classes, thinking that she would soon transfer to a four-year university. She was doing well. The first year of college, however, was way tougher than Cassie had imagined. Her computer broke down in the middle of the semester, so completing assignments became a chore. She didn't have a car, so it took her 2 hours to travel 10 miles to attend her classes, then back home, then to work. She did buy a used car middle of the semester, but that broke down. I know what you're thinking. Geez, awful lot of bad things happening to one person. But when you don't have the money to solve small problems, they grow. When you have the resources, you have the time for a heartbreak. You have the money to see a therapist when you're crying over your boyfriend or girlfriend. Not Cassie. She was exhausted. I'm not alone in finding this. Other research also show that college students are facing hunger and homelessness at a growing rate. So what Cassie needed was public transportation, food security, mental health care. She could have done without the nonviolence prevention programs. Really. What is more is that rates of drug use are actually even across communities. Rich and poor people, white and black and brown people are all using drugs at the same rate. Not to mention that teen pregnancy is on the decline. Additionally, I don't know if you knew, but preventing teen pregnancy actually does not higher the chances of socioeconomic mobility among the poor. Now, middle-class professional women have something to lose if they get pregnant. You know, the motherhood tax. But poor women have no opportunities to begin with. On the contrary, what this incessant focus on teen pregnancy prevention does is that it reinforces stereotypes that Black and Latinx women are sexually precocious and irresponsible, that men in these communities are sexual predators. Similarly, violence is not a problem solely in marginalized communities. As you may have heard, police brutality and gun violence are serious issues facing US America. So what happens when we incessantly focus on risk behavior prevention in Black and brown communities is it reinforces racist and classist stereotypes about what Black and brown people are. What was most infuriating to me is that some of the Black and brown kids I spent time with had internalized these discourses. One bright young woman who got into a four-year university decided to join the military. She told me she needed discipline first, or people like her will go in the wrong path. Another young Latina told me she wanted the birth control that went inside her skin, because people like her, Latina women, give birth left and right. When I told her she wasn't pregnant, neither were her friends and cousins, she told me, oh, they will be. So when we're telling black and brown young people that they're social problems, they're beginning to think that they are, and that they're successful when merely they avoid some imaginary social problem constructed by the white middle class. Where do these come from? What I find and what other scholars argue is that these risk narratives, these ideas that black and brown kids are social problems to be solved, they're rooted in racist, classist stereotypes. They're rooted in discourses that construct all black and brown bodies to be problems. To be problems, to be solved, to be feared, to be obliterated. So when you're focusing on altering risk behaviors, even through your benevolent desires to help the poor black and brown at-risk kids, you're reinforcing racist and classist stereotypes. What we need to challenge are systems of poverty. And this focus on risk behaviors is harmful because it diverts resources. The teachers, nonprofits, and community members in the place where I did my field work, where I spend my time, thought that their top priority was to prevent drugs, gangs, and violence, when they didn't even exist at the rate that we imagine. One nonprofit, for example, started out to assist black and brown kids achieve their academic goals, had to then divert its resources to help them navigate the criminal justice system. Why? Not because black and brown high schoolers do anything different than the white middle class high schoolers. Nothing. Research shows nothing. It's because police is present at a higher rate in black and brown schools and communities. It's because of a racist criminal justice system. Unfortunately, this process of labeling kids begins early, as early as elementary school. Teachers, community members think of 8 and 10-year-olds as potential gang members, violent drug users, and potential teen parents. While what we need are better schools, food security, higher wages, more employment. What I urge you to do then, if you're a nonprofit worker, if you're a local, national, international leader, or simply a citizen who cares about a more just world, a world where all our kids have equal opportunities, I ask you to challenge policies and practices that provide nonviolence training and pregnancy prevention at the cost of food, that incessantly punish our black and brown kids, thinking that otherwise they would become violent criminals. I ask you to challenge the system through your votes, campaigns, and through other forms of political action, to demand food justice, more grocery stores, cheaper food, to demand more funding for all our schools, to demand employment, wages, much higher wages, to demand for an end of mass incarceration, an end of a racist criminal justice system, end of policing in our schools. Now, I know poverty is a complex problem. I know what you're thinking, preaching, preaching. I know it's a complex problem. It's racialized, it's gendered, and it's kept in place through complex mechanisms. And I'm not claiming to have an overarching solution to this. There are multiple talented people studying it, fighting it, thinking about it. I'm here today, despite my nervousness, to tell you a small part of the story. Constructing our Black and Latinx kids as social problems, as potential burdens on society, as drug users, violent criminals, teen pregnancy, it's harmful. Not only is it harmful because it's based on wrong ideas about what these communities look like, but it's harmful because it constructs them not as individuals with hopes and dreams, but as at-risk youth. So I urge you to think of Black and Latinx kids as individuals with different kinds of hopes and dreams, and stop labeling them as at risk. Thank you.